Thank you for tuning in to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 192. Once upon a time I was falling in love, but now I'm only falling apart. There's nothing I can do, a total eclipse of the heart.
Fantasy Sun.
A total eclipse of your fantasy sun.
Or suns. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, my name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And lead singer of a Bonnie Tyler cover band, I am Michael Miller.
He's fibbing a bit. He stopped that when he started writing soap operas, but he did used to do that. I could vouch for him there.
You should have seen how big my hair was.
He still wears the shoulder pads.
Well, it gives me height, makes me look more intimidating. I'm not very intimidating at 5'8", so I like anything I can do to get a leg up. You know, big shoulders. You know, like padding in my pecs under my shirt, butt implants. You know, whatever.
Yeah, whatever works.
Big boots with spikes on them.
We'd like to welcome everyone to the World Builder's Anvil today. This is the place where we are always on top and on target of what is relevant in the world of fantasy world building. So we figure about a month after the actual total eclipse passed through the United States, we'll get to it. Because
is this dropping that late?
Yeah.
The eclipse happened a month ago?
Yeah. Yeah,
at the point of recording this, the eclipse hasn't happened yet.
But we are so on ball.
On the ball.
We're going to record it.
You know what, though? I think this is better because now, since everyone has seen it and they've gotten all the coverage and they've been able to look it up if they missed it, they've had a chance to familiarize themselves, and now we can look at it from a world builder's perspective. Right.
Because today's topic is the total eclipse of your fantasy suns.
It was planned. It was a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Planned this way.
It was all planned. This is all part of the strategy to make everyone a better world builder, or if you're just a fantasy lover, to understand the logic it takes to really put together a made up world. Okay.
A made up eclipse. A fake eclipse.
And really kind of what inspired this was I started doing research because I'm a geek, you know.
No.
about how do how do ancient cultures sort of look at eclipses? Just, you figured it would be bad, and lo and behold, yes, pretty much exclusively across the world, there are really no good stories about when the sun gets covered up. There's really nothing positive about it because the sun, when you think about it from like a cultural standpoint, especially in early cultures, it was their calendar. It was the thing that told them when to plant, when to harvest, you know, and they would use it maybe in conjunction with the moon, but the sun is the overall riding thing. The further you are from the equator, how far it goes overhead, and then when it starts to, you know, to recede back away from you, talks about how the Earth's tilting. So that would give a lot of information to primitive people who didn't have Android or an iPhone to tell them what day it was.
And a lot of cultures not only are looking at the sun like, hey, that's what gives us our calendar, lets us know when to plant things. Also, it's God. That's God in the sky, that glowing ball.
Yes, the glowing balls are always important things. And, you know, I think episode 9, we talked about...
Jeff, if your balls are glowing, you should really see a doctor.
Glowing balls are something very powerful to a fantasy
glowing
culture.
Balls are they're very important. Glowing balls.
But now...
Couldn't let that one go.
You shouldn't. That's part of your job. Okay.
That's what I'm here for.
So one of these is, is like I did an episode on the cosmos very early on, and Michael and I at some point will probably revisit that a bit. But really the thing to keep in mind is out of all of the things that you can see from a planetary body, the sun will be the most important because obviously it's what gives life to the world that is on it. It gives the energy. The chemistry of the world needs energy to work, and most energy comes from the sun. Or a flashlight. Yeah, that'll bring life to a world. That's not super effective through a camera.
I realize that.
He's trying to blind me with I'm assuming a bright
I was
flashlight.
Just showing you that my snazzy new flashlight has a strobe feature.
The audience appreciates. I hope no one was...
You weren't supposed to call audio attention to it. I was just showing.
I just hope no one was looking directly into the speaker when that happened.
Yeah. Oh gosh, guys, I'm sorry.
You didn't think about that.
I wasn't even considering that.
So I kind of found this quick article though from I think it was National Geographic, the most important people on Earth, at least in my little head, and they did a quick article. It seems like there's a lot of articles out about a total eclipse because we will probably never see another one, and definitely not cross from coast to coast through the United States again in our lifetimes.
I thought there was going to be another one in like 6 years.
There will be not a total eclipse.
Oh.
A total eclipse is where the moon perfectly blocks the sun from Earth. And that is a very rare thing to happen. And especially for such a long swath through our country, it's very, very rare for it to happen. So in the Northern Hemisphere, in America, in other parts of the world you might, but where we are, probably not again in our lifetimes. Or I could be wrong and it will be 6 years. And then Michael, if he remembers, which he probably would because he's a jerk like that, he would probably taunt me at that point.
Well, I feel kind of jobbed by it because Jeff and I live in the Northeast and we're actually not going to get to see it. Like we are on the corners of the two corners of the country that are not going to see that don't get it. We are there. So we're not going to see a complete eclipse.
It goes pretty much over my parents' house, which is kind of annoying. I can't go visit at this point. But hey, that's life. But so in my research, though, in my extensive research in this one article from National Geographic, they kind of went over a few things, and the first one is the sun is delicious. The sun is probably the most delicious celestial body there is out there. Actually, I believe it was the word eclipse actually stands in Chinese relates to being eaten because that was the way they viewed it was being eaten. The Vikings had sky wolves, and the sky wolves would be chasing down the sun. They would catch the sun, they would grab onto the sun, and they would eat the sun. And I believe in Vietnam, there were toads that would go out and actually eat the sun. And really, even in some of these other ones that we're going to get into, there is still idea that the sun will be devoured in some way. And I guess it kind of makes sense because it kind of looks like a reverse Pac-Man as the sun disappears behind the moon.
Now, when you say in Vietnam there were toads, I assume that these are like a mythical toad?
I would assume it was a mythical toad, yes.
This is some kind of a legend?
A legendary toad, or it could be a frog, depending on, I believe it would kind of vary, maybe regionally in the area. But yes, and that was its tongue, I guess, grabbing the sun to eat it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Now, one of the other sort of common things, and we see this more in Aboriginal or native peoples, as we like to call them, but very old cultures. And usually there's this idea that one of the other common themes are there are demons involved somehow. Like the sky wolves weren't demons, but a lot of times in cultures around the world, it was some kind of demonic influence causing the eclipse to happen. And because of that, in a lot of cultures that are really old, and I would imagine even if you go back through like European cultures when they were really old, they probably had these same same types of ideas, you would have to scare away the what was causing the problem. So you would grab pots, you would start beating pots around, you would start trashing everything out there, and making as much noise as you could. And actually, the writer of the article I was reading it was maybe a NASA guy, goes out and I think he does a song or something to sort of symbolize this, where you would actually make sounds to try and drive away the demonic force that was blocking the sun. So it is essentially. So it was essentially primitive spells, so there would be this a ritual that the tribal communities would come together to perform to scare off the demons. And there you go.
I want to scare off the demons.
You want to scare off the demons?
Sure.
Yeah. No, that's good. It's worked for, 14 billion years. So I guess, what can you say? So, but no, I find that interesting though, because, and this to me is sort of a thing about magical systems, how do you develop spells, and I think a lot of times, especially gamers, we get tied up in this idea of Dungeons and Dragons spell magic. And so we think of, well, how will we create a fireball? How do we create like a magic missile? How do we do like stuff like these effect spells that, work in these games? But we don't think about typically why were spells created, and they were typically some sort of interface to get something done, usually involving gods. So, you have there's a lot of like name magic in ancient Egypt, and which is kind of really cool stuff. Don't let people know your real name. So in the West, we're all screwed. All screwed because everyone knows our real name, except for me. I've lied about my name every day of my life. It's actually not Jeffrey W. Ingram, but I can't tell you what it is. It's Bill Smith, but don't let anyone know. Okay. Now.
Don't tell me. Top secret.
Shh. Yeah. But, that's one of the things to think about, when you're really, stuck struggling creating magic. A lot of times it's because you're trying to take someone's vision of it. But look to your cultures and see, what do they need done? What are they afraid of? What would they like more of? Spells are typically rituals created to try and do those types of activities. And a lot of times I think, especially, I don't know, I shouldn't say that, but especially gamers, which I'm going to say it even though it might not be true. Don't think about effects for games. Spells don't have to be that. And you can't think of them that way. And I have nothing against that. And as a person who's gamed a lot, it makes perfect sense to me. But normally just think of, using things like a total eclipse to inspire your magic instead of trying to force out your own way of recreating a system that you saw somewhere else. And now this next bullet point actually got Michael 6,000 to 10,000 years in prison earlier in his life.
I didn't want everyone to know that I can't die.
Oh, wait.
Jeff, you're gonna have to edit that out.
Yeah, I'll make sure to get that one out.
I'm gonna tell them your real name. You better edit that out.
You better not.
Well, then you don't tell them I'm immortal.
Okay, well, I'll make sure to cut out both of those parts. Okay. Now, this next point. Wait, hold on. Let me clap. Okay. This next point, celestial larceny. This is something where things come to steal. Koreans had fire dogs, and they would come sort of steal the moon away. There was a god whose name I'm about to mispronounce, Ryu, who the actual story with him was he went and stole this celestial elixir of immortality from the gods. And he was like, ha ha. And I believe he was a demon because once again, it's usually demons involved.
He was like, what? Could you?
Like, really as creepy as you could, ha ha ha. And
I just wanted you to go, the way you just did a second ago.
Well, I thought making it more lame at that point was even better. I could have been like, but no. Mm-hmm. And so he steals and starts chugging down this elixir, and the goddess Vishnu shows up, chops his head off. Because he shouldn't do that. But now he had started to drink the elixir, so his head is immortal and floats around the earth. And once every year it steals away this, or once in a while it steals away the sun, because it's this demon thief, or the head of, which is floating around the earth.
So are they aware that the moon is a thing and it's the moon, or are they saying the demon head is the moon, or are they saying they're two separate things?
I think at this point it's the head of the demon, or at this point they probably don't believe this, but originally when they came up with the story, they believed the moon was a demonic head that floated around.
Okay. So
from my extensive research, I could verify that.
At night, they would look up at the moon. They'd be like, "That's a demon head."
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Works for me. Makes sense.
Yep. And that's what would steal away the sun when you had a total eclipse. Because once again, you are fundamentally throwing the order of a society at risk. And I think another cool takeaway from here is if you have your secret societies, or not necessarily secret, but your counterculture societies, they might take advantage of this, right? Like this might be a time of celebration for counterculture factions within a society. But that's typically when societies start getting larger, because really there's no bigger sort of step in or negative thing than an actual sun being blocked out. This really fundamentally shakes the foundation of especially an older culture. Science kind of ruins some of these things, and I'm disappointed at science for that, because some of these are much better than it's a moon. But and the interesting thing is, though, they also don't go away. If you look at modern cultures today, we still have issues where people don't get the behavior of it. In a lot of places, it's still considered dangerous for pregnant women and or the baby. I don't know why. I could not find an explanation of why it is dangerous for pregnant women or babies, but I guess there are cultures out there who believe that is true. Or people today, I shouldn't even say cultures. I don't really even know if it's a culturally thing, but there are people who believe that if a total eclipse happens, it is a bad sign for the pregnancy or the woman carrying the child. And another interesting one is there are a lot of people who think you can't look directly at a total eclipse sun.
Well, I thought that's not the case.
That's not the case, and this is a very common one, because if it's a lunar eclipse, you can't. If it's any other form of eclipse, if it's not total, you can't. But the moon is filtering out the direct sun rays, so you're not getting direct sunlight into your eyes. So at the moment, it is a total eclipse. And this is according to NASA. There will be a link in the show notes. So if you don't believe me, go yell at NASA. But
if you don't believe me, yell at NASA.
Any errors or problems with this entire episode is National Geographic or NASA's fault, not mine. That's why I'll definitely share the links out for these. But yes, when it's at the point of a total eclipse, you have a filter between you and the sun. It's called the moon. That's the point of it being a total eclipse. Now, if you're not in the total eclipse section, you're getting some direct sunlight in your eyes, which is bad. You don't want direct sunlight into your eyes, but when the moon's between you and the sun, that is a total eclipse and is fine in those moments. Now, I wouldn't try and time it if you're on the edge where you get like a few seconds of it. But, if you're at the point where you get the full 7 minutes, once it's there for a bit, if you want to take off those goggles, you can. Now, I'm not going to, because where I live, like Michael said, we're in the wrong end of the country. Once again, our beach water is colder, and we don't get the total eclipse. That's like double not fair. The thing I want people to take away is, one, total eclipses are really cool ideas to get you started if you're struggling coming up with magic for your world. These are the foundational magical spells are coming out from time periods when people are first trying to explain things. And total eclipses are once they are seen, there will have to be a story explaining what that is and what's going on for a culture. And it's almost always, and I just say almost always because there might be one out there, but as far as I know, there are really no cultures that find it positive. With the side caveat, once again, that if you have a counterculture, something going against the main culture, they might view this as a good omen that the culture is getting ready to collapse, and it's their time is at hand, or it might be time to do something negative. I just find this total eclipse thing is really cool, and I'm very disappointed I'm not in a spot where I'm going to get a full version of it, and just due to life, I can't get to a spot right now. But it's very awesome for the people who are there. I hope you saw it. If not, we'll get to that in the real world task.
I think it'd be funny if you're like writing a fantasy story and you've got some charlatan who is threatening to blot out the sun. Mm-hmm. He happens to do it just prior to an eclipse, and then claims that he did it.
I think that has happened. I don't know if that was King Arthur and the Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court. There's a time traveling. I think that's something that's come up in time traveling stories before, or maybe it was I don't know, the H.G. Wells time traveling one. But some of the earlier time travel ones at least have dealt with that. And I was thinking, it was actually very clever in Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End. The beginning of it is very much like Independence Day, where these giant saucer-shaped ships that come down and they start hovering over major countries. And so the whole world's freaking out. But pretty much at that point on, it becomes a very good story. Not just sort of a fun little action movie like Independence Day was. But one of the cool things it was where the Earthlings upset the aliens, so the aliens actually literally created a disk that would cause an eclipse over a country until the country conceded to their demands. And I'm not going to go into why. The book's really old, but go read Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, because it was actually an alien invasion, you could call it, and they used blotting out the sun as a weapon against the country on Earth, tech level 1960s. So I thought that was a very cool alien weapon, and not the typical types of stuff that you see where they're trying to wipe out humanity. So very cool story. Go check out Arthur C. Clarke as a side note. But the other thing to take away too is, because of these things and the early beliefs in your cultures, much like I was saying, like we had these early things with the celestial larceny, or being a wizard to take on the demons who blocked out the sun, or the mythological beings trying to eat the moon. On top of that, those initial stories, because of the negative connotations that get stuck in the early cultures, even through today, even into modern cultures, misconceptions will pervade, and some will come in and be newer ones. Like, I don't know if people early on were afraid to look at a total eclipse or not. I think that's more of a new one, because we know that you shouldn't look directly into the sun. But those kind of behaviors will direct the behavior of the cultures, at least through, several thousand years after early civilizations come around. So the sun and especially the eclipse of the sun are exceptionally important features and ways for you to create a naturalistic society. And then for bonus points, though, if you're one of those people who came up with multiple suns, you get to think about how to deal with the multiple suns. Is it like a eclipse where both suns are blotted out by a moon? Obviously, if there's no moon, you can't have a total eclipse. But if you have binary suns, you would still have one sun possibly blotting out the other one. So you could have some variations based off of the solar system that the people are in. But all of those events, so even if it's not a traditional total eclipse the way we think about it, is there a different way? And is it more meaningful if you have the two suns in line with the moon? Or maybe there are multiple moons, and when they're all lined up, it's really bad. I know on Earth, when the planets are all in line, at least the visible ones with the sun, that's typically a bad thing too. So, and actually scientifically, they'll have an effect on tides and that kind of stuff on your planet as well too. So they can be noticed beyond just the bodies in a certain order. So just some fun stuff to think about when developing your culture. And that's really kind of what I was going to here, was to think, when we have these kind of major events, it's a good time to go back and look at your world. So for the world building task of the day, make sure your culture has total eclipse issues, right? If they've ever seen one, what is their view of them? Have they created magic to try and protect themselves from it? Have they maybe grown past that? But what are the behaviors that follow through into the present day of your world that derive from that? Especially if you're going for a naturalistic world, this will really help flesh out your cultures. And you can do stuff too, where you can play around and do opposite stuff if you want people to not connect with the culture just because you want to do it. And hey, it's fantasy. You don't have to mirror what happens on Earth. In many ways, Earth's a pretty lousy world for fantasy novels, because just we don't have the stuff. Now, what is the real world task, Michael?
Make sure your cultures have total eclipse issues. But I feel that the caveat to that needs to be depending on tech level.
Yes, which is what we just talked about. The real world task.
That is the real... Oh, I'm sorry. Read King Lear and get some of Shakespeare's views, and Jeff will have a link in the show notes about that. And you have some quotes here?
Just read the first one, the whole one, for bonus points.
These late eclipses in the sun and moon portend no good to us.
And that's one quote from King Lear and a much larger quote. And so, it's one of those things where I don't want you to think just because early civilizations come up with these ideas that, just a few hundred years ago, it made it into literature, because, oh no, it's this eclipse, it's bad. And so, and literally, like when you go to the full quote, it's about it's about rebellions, it's about treason. All the bad stuff happens, it gets attributed in King Lear. Those kind of things happen because of eclipses. And the full quote will be included in the show notes.
Is that? Oh, okay. I mean, did you want me to read the whole thing?
If you're feeling up to reading a full paragraph of Shakespeare.
I'll give it a try. I mean, there's definitely some tricky language in here. Just making sure there's a couple of words that look a little iffy. Okay. These late eclipses in the sun and moon portend no good to us. Though the wisdom of nature can reason it thus and thus, yet nature finds itself scourged by the sequent effects. Love cools. Friendship falls off, brothers divide. A city's mutinies, in countries discord, in palaces treason, and the bond cracked twixt son and father. This villain of mine comes under the prediction, there's son against father, the kings fall from bias of nature, there's fathers against child. He kind of said that in the prior stanza. Shakespeare.
I know he's just overwordy with this one, yeah. So, once again, for the full quote, go to the show notes.
Hang on. I was interrupting myself because of that. There's two or three more sentences. We have seen the best of our time, machinations, hollowness, treachery, and ruinous disorders follow us disquietly to our graves. Find out this villain, Edmund. It shall lose thee nothing. Do it carefully. And the noble and the true-hearted Kent banished. his office, honesty, 'tis strange. Sorry.
Yes. So a little Shakespeare there, and we apologize.
Yeah, very little by my delivery.
But it's one of those, cold reading Shakespeare for modern English speakers is not natural. So, but once again, maybe go watch a King Lear movie. Might be better. I don't know. Probably get that line delivered really well by a Shakespearean actor. But
did what's his name? Oh boy. Did Brana do King Lear?
I don't think he did King Lear or King Lear.
I love Kenneth Branagh.
He did some of my favorite Shakespeare, but I don't think he did King Lear. So, go watch some Kenneth Branagh Shakespeare if you want some good Shakespeare. But let's see who did. I'm sure Sir Laurence Olivier did it.
It's always really interesting for the audience to listen while you look stuff up. It's one of my favorite parts of the show.
Well,
I can't break your stones too much because I do it also. So.
Let's see. Sir Laurence Olivier is the big name person here I'm seeing in movies. Obviously, Nigel Hawthorne. A bunch of English actors. I don't know why.
Yeah, big surprise. Shocker there.
Yeah, but no. Go ahead and check out a little just to see that these things start young for cultures, but they stay. It's. In one form or another, they evolve into modern behaviors. And I would imagine at some point, like now, compared to the cultures that, modern industrial or post-industrial countries, have, a lot of them probably fade away or they're no longer maybe even associated with the solar eclipse. But, these are how, people gain their behaviors. These are how cultures are built, and this is the big one. So don't forget about that when you're thinking about your world, and check out some Shakespeare while you're at it. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil. We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends, and so would they. If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting by showing them Stitcher or iTunes, or, best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.